Welcome back to the Tandem podcast. Today we have Andrew DiMartino in the house. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Just trying to deal with all this doing nothing stuff, especially with
Yeah,
everything going on.
yeah, it's kind of tough.
Yeah,
I'm still
and
working. I'm in my garage working,
yeah,
and got two kids running around upstairs. My wife's working from home, so I mean it's
yeah.
crazy, but it
It
kind of
seems like
is
that's
what it
just how it
is.
is lately. Because I've been out because of medical stuff, and so I've been out longer than we've had this quarantine. So it's been rough. But
Yeah.
we'll get into start talking about like kind of how you got into drifting and talk about your car and let's just start it with how do you get into it?
Um. So it's funny. I was watching some of the Lone Star stuff, and I watched the Dustin Miles, and he kind of explained the same thing, or was asked the same thing, and kind of went through what experience was, and mine's kind of similar. Back in the day of like the RSR, like where I think um, Tanner Faust might have been driving the S2000, and I'm trying to think. There was a Supra and I think Skyline or an S chassis. And my mom and I went to like Chicago randomly, drove up there, and we went and watched this like in a parking lot team of drift cars, and that was it. I was
Yeah,
like, this is the coolest thing.
I think that was like the D1 Grand Prix. I know it was like D1 something back in the day because I know a bunch of my buddies went and saw it.
This was probably, I'm trying to think when I started driving, because it was like shortly after I got my license, which would have been like 2003, 2003 or 4. And I went and saw that, and immediately I was just like, man, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And, you know, watching those guys was the start of it. But then, I had an MR2, and, I don't know if you've ever tried to slide one of those. That's probably one of the most terrifying things. So that didn't work out too well. Got rid of that. Uh, kind of went through a couple front wheel drives, the Honda era that everybody has to go through, and then um, I got rid of my Civic that I had and got a SC300 that was just a car that was actually like a salvage car that like we found in a junkyard, but it was totally complete. So I drove that and ended up doing a 1J swap in it, still an automatic. I just drove it. So, but I mean, I put a limited slip in it, and every time it rained, I was out slamming the streets, and I was kind of like pit crewing on my friend's. He had a Miata, and the first time that I went and like really helped him, work on his car was like No Star Bash when it was at Gateway Motorsports Park,
Yep.
which was a little while back now. But that was, I had just swapped my Lexus, and he went up there, um, and I helped him throughout that weekend, and that really kind of solidified like what direction I was going. Um, I I had my Lexus. It's actually a buddy of mine's now, but it was just a street car that I dailied, and like I said, me and him would go slam the streets when it was wet because he had a Miata and I had a automatic 1J boat that I would slide around. But man, like it would just it felt right. And after that, the car that I currently drive popped up as a roller. Patrick Farkas um, owned it at the time, and I had followed the build for a long time. And I had actually bought two or three things off of that car because he was actually parting it out. And I kind of like looked at my street. I was like, okay, I'm just going to transition this into a full on, drift build instead of just like a a street slider or whatever you want to call it. So I started like collecting parts from him, and then he offered it to me as a roller with no engine, and like it had the kit and the coilovers and a couple arms, but that was basically the extent of it. And I was like, oh well, he was in Ohio, so I kind of threw the idea around with my wife and then talked to my dad. And, the car was and that was the biggest thing. Like, okay, cool, that's already done. Well, I'll just throw my engine in it. I'll throw this transmission that I've got in it, and then we're gonna go and we're gonna go as hard as we can, right?
Yep.
Well, come to find out, my wife was pregnant, and so then I kind of like the car got like pretty heavily delayed, like between the time that I bought it, because I'm kind of a perfectionist with a lot of things, and like I kept finding little things and like a brake lines. I didn't like how it was just like one thing after another, and then I was like double and triple buying parts for the car. So, like a year turned into 2 years, and then like we needed to do a gender reveal, and I was like, well, I need to get this car running because I want to do the gender reveal, like with the car. That was the deal. Like as soon as we found out, I was like, well, I have to get the car going. Get the Highway Max color smoking tires, and we're gonna invite everybody we know, and I'm gonna do this big ripper in the driveway because I couldn't
Yep.
find anywhere to like. I ended up doing like a third gear ripper sitting here in the driveway, and I like set off every smoke rash of no sleep for like 2 weeks leading up to that. And it was just insane, man. Like, and that's kind of like once it was running, the car like it really like kind of relit the fire because you get a car and it's like a project and it doesn't really run, and you kind of lose steam a little bit because you start just pouring money into it hoping to get it where you want it. And as soon as it was running and I did that, I was like, I have to finish this and I have to get it to an event.
Yeah, it seems like that's
I,
usually half the battle when it comes to when you start building a car is get it running and then focus on kind of the other aspects of it. And it
yeah.
usually pans out a little bit better if you do it that way.
Yeah, and that's I'll say that I grew up. My dad it was into like hot rods and Harleys. So that's kind of what I grew up around. We built a bunch of hot rods, and everything we did was like get a car running, make it pretty later. So we would get these hot rods running, drive them for a month or two, put 5,000 miles on these hot rods just in primer or like mixed matched body panels or whatever, and just make sure that like everything was sorted, and that's kind of what was like ingrained into me when I was you're really young. So like the fact that the car was pretty was kind of nice. So it was just like, okay, cool, well, I'm gonna make everything underneath that you don't see like really sick so that I can just go wear this poor car out and not have to work on it at the track, because that's the like I
Yeah,
hate working on my.
I know the feeling.
So
So you kind of is that where you kind of picked up your fabrication skills when it came to that? And is that how it kind of transitioned, or have you always been like a fabricator that built cars?
so like I said, growing up around dad, always building hot rods and different things and bikes and whatever. I always kind of had like this like love and passion for like you know putting things together that didn't really belong. So I guess like I grew up, I didn't know that I was going to be a fabricator until like my last year of high school, and I really didn't want to be there. I would rather like be doing something with my hands. So I took welding class, and that was in '04, and um, I really enjoyed it. So like I was like, okay, well, I can't really afford to pay someone to do this or that. So I, like figure it out. So, in 2004, I really started, welding a lot, and then that kind of progressed, and I just tried to do it every day, and couldn't really afford to. I was like looking at cars like Forrest Wang's car, and I was like, man, I want to have gussets everywhere, and I want all this stuff to be super nice, also be like a proper car that doesn't break. So it just turned into like me taking like the hot rod aspect with dad and kind of applying it to a drift car, but like grabbing parts don't necessarily belong together, but like, oh, I know that this fan works off of this car as a stock car, so I'm going to use that because they're cheap and I know they
Yeah.
work. So like, I, yes, fabrication came from like my dad, but also like he pushed me to be a better fabricator and like wanted me to do stuff for him. So he would like while I was working for him, I guess kind of still does, have a automotive repair shop, all Japanese, and building hot rods and stuff. He really wanted me to kind of surpass his skills, so he would like send me to do things. He like, yeah, I'm gonna send you to Detroit. I want you to go learn how to work on these like sheet metal fabrication and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Went up, spent some time with Ron Fournier, and did some like stretcher, English wheel, planishing hammer, gas welding aluminum, which is the weirdest
Oh
thing I've
wow.
ever done. It's super weird, but what an art, man. Like
Yeah, it's super old school, just like the old what like
it's
filling
like
lead.
the
Yeah.
lead, dude. It's exactly right, man. You use like flux and everything. And you use this like really an interesting art. Like I look at all these like pro builds, and for whatever reason, like I definitely don't drive enough to drive a pro car of any caliber. But like I go to like FD and stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, this looks like it works really good. So I'm gonna try to do that like on my car because like
Yeah.
I see that it works on this pro car. So as little as I actually drive, it should work.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that answers your question even a little bit, but
No, it's cool. I actually like it because there's a lot of stuff when it comes to like fabrication on pro cars that you see that you don't really know why because you can't like sit down with the engineer or the fabricator that built it. But there's like a lot of people out there that I need to do it this way because it's done like how that guy does it or that guy does it.
right.
And it's kind of cool to kind of see another fabricator like realize like I'm gonna do it this way because I've seen it that way. And I know with a lot of the old school hot rod stuff, I mean there's a lot of like hiding stuff and like shaving like firewalls and just like making everything look super clean and super simple. And you could kind of see the transition when it comes to some drivers and see where that comes from and or well fabricators when it comes to that. But yeah, it's kind of cool to see that and how people have done it and the different techniques that people use.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'll have to say that I'm really fortunate to work for Haltech because in the past few years I've had the opportunity to be closer to some of these cars than I would ever just be able to just like walking in off the street to go to work or to watch like FD Irwindale or Atlanta or whatever. Because we've got a handful, well, quite a few now, but quite a few people that are running our products, and I go down there to help support them, and I get to really like not just help them, but like actually like poke them and be like, hey, so you did this. I see that. Do you like it? Are you having any issues with it? So, I do get to ask some of the questions that, your normal, Joe blow off the street wouldn't necessarily get the time to like be around, you know, like um it like during the day, obviously, you know, what's great about FD that I love so much is you can still like walk the pits as like a spectator and like talk to the drivers, and 99% of the drivers are there to talk to you. Their crew chiefs will talk to you, and you know, if you have a question about their car, they'll answer it, you know, because it's not really like with drag racing. That's another thing I'm around a lot when it comes to work. The drag racers, they have these little secrets, and they're like, "Oh, well, I can't tell you that. That's a trade secret. That made my car 4/10 faster." And it's like, aren't we all here to do the same thing? Like that, like it's a different kind of competition
Yeah, yeah, and
with like
yeah,
drag racers.
I see that with like FD's rule book is kind of clear cut when it comes to power with the tire ratio, and it's kind of you can't really fudge that. I mean, you can get more grip out of a car and whatnot, but I mean, there's only so much you can get to. But like when it comes to like drag race and stuff, it's dog eat dog when it comes to that, and it's like that with a
Yeah.
lot of motorsports too, especially with any like automotive racing because everybody's trying to be up on each other and everybody wants to win, which you with drifting, it's more of you can really show your skills and shine when it comes to being a competent driver versus somebody with the best built weapon.
Yeah, and I agree. I'll have to say that, you know, it is with FD level. I'll throw that with F level. Um, the big thing that I've noticed is having a proper team behind a proper driver is what wins, you know, all of this, because you know, you'll have the best drivers in the world, and man, if they just can't make a 5 minute call because they only have, you know, them and then two of their buddies, you know, like the fuel guy and the tire guy, you know, so like you got the best driver and then you just don't have the hands, you know, so if you can have the team behind the driver, I think that that's what really wins FD stuff more than anything, you know, like having the knowledge base that's in your corner as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing with FD. I mean, I even think that with some of like the grassroots stuff. I mean, especially when it comes to like the wow, I can't. I'm like pro am stuff, especially
Yeah.
with that because you. I mean, you can build an amazing car, but you got to still be able to have a good spotter, tell you where you're driving, and tell you kind of how you're driving and kind of where you need to go next or what needs to be done or where you can pull some either more grip or less grip or what you
Yeah,
should do in
or
car
I've
setup.
noticed. Yeah, I've personally experienced not having a spotter in a competition type setup or like setting. Not having a spotter can make or break runs, because you know, I'm not a real competitive person. I do it for the fun. I do it to go out there with my buddies and, get close and, you know, burn some tires, go through your frustrations. You know, everybody works
Yeah.
really hard to do what we do. And, you know, that kind of the byproduct of that is a seriously stressful life outside of, the couple days that you get to go thrash on your car. But not having a spotter at a competition, I ended up just assuming, Jay Z S13, oh, that's going to be a really fast car. Um, but I ended up almost running him over throughout the entire follow. Like I couldn't even be on throttle. But if I had known that, I could have just pumped the tires up like crazy. But I was like, oh, cool, and just obviously my lead lap was great, but my follow lap was garbage, and I ended up taking myself out because I didn't have someone saying, "Hey, listen, this car is super like slow on transitions. Like as they transition, it just slows down like crazy, and then as he exits that corner, it just doesn't accelerate like most of the other cars. And by not knowing that, I straightened like 3 times in one run.
Yeah.
Just trying to, like if I had had a spotter, I would have been in good shape because they, oh man, you gotta, pump the tires up like crazy, take some grip out of the car so that you can, just kind of skate behind him. But, that's
Yeah.
what you
So
get. That's not having a team.
you live and you learn. So uh, we kind of talked about your S13, or sorry, your S13, your SC300, and can you tell me more about the car? I mean, it's a SC300, and you got that mint color and with that livery, and
Yep.
um,
Yeah, so it's actually a Nissan color. So it is the 1990 Sylvia two-tone seafoam green. Actually, it is FG0. I actually have a touch-up hand. Um, but so that that's the like the S13 color, right? I mean, like that's what the car came as. Like that's my car originally. It was the culmination of two cars. So
yeah,
Patrick built a car. It was a dark green, which is obviously the base car. It's a 92 original 5-speed, and he had the front end washout on him and pop a barrier up at Killcare, I think. So kind of like what happened to me, the car that had the body kit on it came up as a roller. He bought the roller, put the kit on his car, fixed the crunched panels, and went back at it with a wide body, big wheel, hot boy setup. Well,
yep,
after I got it, I kind of was like, man, I'm gonna make this car like a street car that's or like a race car that's very streetable, and that's all gone now. But as the car sits now, we'll start with the engine. It's a 1.5J. It's a built non-VVTi 1J head, BC 264 cams, springs, retainers. It does have OEM valves, 3-angle valve job. The head was milled a little bit, and then the bottom end is a kind of a last minute oh shit kind of put together bottom end that's just been a hammer. It was the original engine out of my other street Lexus that had 245,000 miles on it.
Jesus.
Um, so 3-liter NA2J block. It has turbo pistons in it, new rings. We gapped those to like what all the big horsepower cars gap their rings at. Um, ARP rod bolts on the factory rods, ACL race bearings, and dingleberry hone. Like in the shop, like in the middle of the night, throw it together, trying to get it ready for grid life, like Midwest, like two or three, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, and so I put it all together. At the time, it did have a 6262 on it, precision billet journal bearing turbo, and that was a good turbo. It lit pretty hard for what it was. Now it has a Garrett GTX 3584 RS, which I'll have to say it is the jam. That is a hell of a turbo. It actually spools 500 RPMs faster than the 6262 Precision.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I work with Tile. I've used Tile stuff for a really long time now. Again, one of those things that once you find a product that works, you just kind of stick with it. And I've used them for like, I'm gonna date myself, 2006
Yeah, because
was the first year that I bought Tile stuff.
I know, like back in the
So
day, like the tile stuff was always like the big horsepower, bulletproof, reliable stuff when everybody
yeah,
started using like turbo stuff when it came to like tile and like HGK. Like everybody knew like tile was like big horsepower stuff.
right.
And
Yeah, dude.
I'm guessing you're running Haltech for the ECU.
Yeah, yeah. So so interesting enough. This is not my first Haltech. The first Haltech was on an FC that I built for land speed that had an RP25 in it.
Oh, wow.
The car went 183 in a mile and a half, so the car was definitely used. But yeah, so that when the Elite came out, they announced it. I'm trying to think when that was. A while ago, long time ago. At PRI, they announced it. This is another one of those stories of triple buying stuff. I had already bought a few other types of ECUs and piggybacks and all that bullshit, and um, I put the Elite on it, and I was bound and determined because it was able to do drive-by-wire. I was gonna make my car drive-by-wire, and I did, and I have to say it's one of the coolest things you can play with. The Elite 2500 is the kind of the flagship. It's currently the current line of ECUs. The 2500 is the flagship. It's our highest ECU. Drive-by-wire, race functions, all that, all the stuff you can think of doing. I used a throttle body from a Tundra. Again, this is like use things you know don't fail.
Yep.
It's a so I drive a 2010 Tundra, and I was like, hey, this throttle body is, it's like the right size. So I'm like looking, I measure, and it was like 74 millimeters. I was like, that's what everybody recommends for a JZ to make like really good horsepower and still have the response. So I was like, cool, I'm gonna get me one of these. I got one off eBay for like $60.
Yep.
So I actually modified an intake manifold to run drive-by-wire, delete all that idle air control valve stuff that always fails on JZs, and the thing idles perfect, it cold starts perfect. I'm like, everybody's like, oh, but drive-by-wire feels like crap. Well, that's because they're driving stock vehicles, right? So
Yeah.
mine, with the Elite, you can play with the way that the drive-by-wire feels. So you can have a super snappy, over responsive pedal, or you can have a lazy, lethargic pedal and do however you want in between.
Yeah.
And once I dialed that, man, I use rotational idle, which is like an old school rally car thing. That's how they used to um, cool these little engines that would make so much cylinder temperature. They would actually cut a cylinder per rotation and still spray fuel, so it actually uses the fuel to cool the pistons and the cylinder walls and the valves and all of that. So like I was like, cool, I'm gonna use this to idle up, and it sounds rad. But then turns out it actually works.
Hmm.
Like I lost an oil cooler at Grid Life at Road Atlanta in the middle of summer. I don't know if you've been to Atlanta in the middle of summer, but it's a little bit warm. My car, after a rip through the S's, I was at like 265-degree oil temperatures.
Holy cow.
And yeah, dude, they were like, I punctured the oil cooler, looped it, and just said, okay, you know what? I'm going out. I want to drive the car. Well, I cruise through the S's, come to the back straight, and I sit there with rotational idle on. And while I was sitting there waiting to send it down the hill, my oil temps dropped from like 265 down to like 235. Just sitting there. So
Wow.
like the rotational idle thing, that was like a big old ricer, like sounds like a big cam high idle, actually works. So like I was like, this is really cool. I'm gonna use it all the time. So, I mean, like functions like that with like having like a proper ECU is like super nice. Like
Yeah.
even if you don't know how they work, like they're there for a reason.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why like people get so scared of like standalones a lot of the time is because they have so many like crazy functions like that. And if you don't really know or your tuner doesn't know that kind of stuff, you're not going to know how to utilize it properly.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and that's that's something I spent a little time in the marketing side of Haltech like the last year, and trying to take the scary out of standalone was like my big thing. Like I would give spiels at different like track events about like what things scare you about all of this, and people would talk to me, and I would kind of talk to them, and they'd be like, oh, that makes total sense now. With just a little bit of like Q&A, like it stuff out for most people.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool that you, coming from like a fabrication background, is able to come into like the being part of Hull Tech and um, being able to like help people with like certain aspects that they wouldn't expect that these standalones can do and will do for you when it comes to um, programming.
Yeah. Funny enough, before I worked for Haltech, I was wiring airplanes. So I was hired as a fabricator at a hangar, and for I don't know why they hired me as a fabricator because like they only brought me things to do because I had a little fabrication shop for a couple of years, and they hired me as a fabricator. Realized that they really don't have that many fabrication needs, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to learn how to do avionics?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." So I ended up learning, like electronics and wiring and everything that comes along with doing an installation on an aircraft. And about the time that you would guess you kind of get tired of certain jobs. Well, I was definitely getting tired of working on airplanes and learning how to be a contortionist and dealing with all of that was about the time that I bought my Haltech. And I went in and I was like, I had my big box of stuff because I had gone and I had like ordered it with my now boss. And I just had this big box and I'm like walking out. And I'm like, hey, it looks like you need another wiring guy. And just as a joke, and like cruised on out, with my box of parts. And then like, I don't know, maybe 2 months later, I get a phone or like a text message. And he was like, hey, were you serious about that job? And I was like, what job are you talking about? And he was like, doing wiring for us. And I was like, yes, absolutely yes. So that was kind of the beginning of my next chapter, like getting into real motorsports, like as a job. Like, how cool is that? Like,
Yeah.
not a lot of people say that, and being lucky that they are based in Lexington, where I live and am from. Um, being in motorsports is like pretty amazing.
Yeah, and like I was scrolling through some of your Instagram stuff and I've seen like some of the projects that you're working. Like we were like one of the first ones to do like the wiring and the Haltech ECU on that what is the LSV12 or whatever it is. Is it a
Yeah,
V12?
yeah. So the that V12, we got one of the first production iron block V12s as like a run stand. My coworker wired that one, but then I built a quad turbo kit for it, which that was 2 months of nonstop, every day, all day, 8 to 10 hours every single day for 2 weeks, or for two
Jesus.
months. I'm sorry, and that was really cool. But like after that, I didn't pick up a welding torch for like at least 2 weeks. I just didn't even want to look at it. I was just like so over it. Um, working for Haltech has given me a lot of opportunities. One of the first things that I had the opportunity of doing was actually I flew out to Oklahoma and worked on 2 of the Street Outlaws cars.
Oh, really?
And yeah, like we flew out there and we had to wire them. This was still like super early, before we offered like a plug and play harness for these V8 cars. And we went out there and ran into a snag because one of them had this like super cheater like pro stock intake manifold that was actually like chopped up like crazy, but then like bondoed back together to look like it was an untouched manifold.
Oh, really?
Well, it had like a solid inch of bondo in a few places, but it was like it made a lot of horsepower for like a carburetor.
Yeah.
Well, they were going EFI, so I went to like add fuel rails to this thing, and I was like, guys, I'm grinding here, and I still haven't found the bottom of this bondo. And the guy who owned the car was like, oh yeah, that was like this like super cheater, hush hush manifold from like pro stock days. And I was like, I can't do anything with this. Like, and now the guy who owned this thing, he like proper fabricator too, and like the whole thing like was just such a crazy thing. Me and him ended up taking an old tunnel ram, and we spent, oh, god, we started welding at like 11 a.m. and then like I left at 3 a.m. because we had to raise the ports because it was there's a big block Chevy, and it had high port heads on it. So you have to like weld up the bottom of the port and then weld up the top of the port and then like add flats for all the nitrous. And so like me and him took turns welding until, like I said, until like 3 in the morning, when I was like, okay, listen, dude, like I can barely keep my eyes open. I need to go back to the hotel and sleep for a couple hours. But it was like the coolest thing, that like entry to motorsports profession. Like, let's go work on these super famous cars from Discovery Channel. Like, I can't talk well enough for like the place that I work. Like, it is a dream job. Like you get to play with race cars all
Yep.
day.
Yep.
Well,
I fully
sometimes.
understand. And but it's like it's really cool to see like the leaps and bounds of some of the standalone ECUs have, because back in the day I think there was only a few companies that made them. They're pretty unintuitive, and now you see a lot of these standalones are self-tuning, and you just kind of throw it on there and you go do pulls in your car and it just does everything for you. And it's kind of cool to see that, but it kind of takes some of the finesse out of it. But there's still a lot of finesse when it comes to like fine tuning it and kind of knowing what you need to do with it.
Yeah, no, I agree. A lot of the self-tuning is stuff that like your normal 2008 plus Chevrolet pickup does.
Yeah.
The one of the common misconceptions of a self-learning ECU, no matter who it is, no matter if it's a Haltech, an AEM, a Link, a whoever else, um, all your timing maps and stuff, unless you are just relying heavily on your knock control, your timing maps are not being tuned. So that's
Yeah.
something that everybody who's like, oh, I'm just going to throw this ECU that self learns on here and just send it. Uh, that's how most people blow their cars up.
Yeah, because you still need to fine tune it, and there's still a lot of
Yes, there
little
is a
things.
lot. There's still a lot of finesse, but I think the biggest thing when it comes to all of that is like the self tuning that it does after it's been tuned by a proper tuner. Because nothing. You can't hit every single cell on a dyno. You just can't. There's like you would be there for months. So being able to have an ECU that's smart enough and reliable enough to just, get it pretty damn close and then go out there and send it hard and then have, the confidence that saying, oh, hey, if this is a little bit off because, I'm in Colorado now, it's going to fix itself and not hurt the engine. Like that's where that like self-tuning stuff really, really does a good job.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool to see some of the advances, because back in the day, I mean, there wasn't really too much of when it comes to protecting the motor and whatnot. And I know there's like a lot of protection when it comes to a lot of safeguards and stuff that really helps with the longevity and also making sure that thing don't blow up on you when it comes
Yeah.
to the tuning.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like being able to set stuff like, oh, my fuel pressure is lower than it should be when you're making a pull, and have the ECU put like a soft limit on it. Like, how nice is that? How many times have people blown their cars up because like they got a fuel pump that's like on the fritz, or like they got a hose that's got a pinhole in it going to their fuel pressure regulator, and like the fuel pressure just dumps off. So then you like nuke all your pistons.
Yep.
Like, because you've got a gauge on it, but it's in the engine bay. So
Yeah, that is
you're
true.
dead on there, man. Like,
I, I always never thought about the fact that you have a fuel pressure regulator gauge on your fuel pressure regulator where you can't see it. And I know
yeah,
back in the day, I know a lot of the drag racing guys, when it came to like the old school V8s, they'd always stick that fuel pressure gauge right in the cowl because you can't put it in the engine bay.
that's
It's
right.
actually like
Oil,
going to it.
fuel, and whatever else. Yep. Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's what's really nice anymore is, you don't have to do all that with a proper ECU. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I haven't even looked down doing like hot laps. I don't even look down unless there's a light on in my dash telling me the car's too hot, or telling me the car's got low oil pressure, or like whatever. I don't even look down. I know most people don't look down. You
Yeah.
can't drive looking down, so
And usually when something goes wrong, it's never when you're putting around the pits.
yeah, exactly. It's full send, and after you get into a groove with your boys and you're out there on the track and you're like, okay, we're gonna hot lap one more time. It's just gonna be one more time. Okay, one more. One more. We're gonna do one more. And you like just glance at the temperature gauge right before you like rip out onto the track, and you're like, 205. It'll make it through one more lap. And it's like, you get at the end and it's like 225, and you're like, and it's like skyrocketing to, like overheating really bad, and you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that last lap, but like when you're in a groove with, like, even if it's not your boys, if you're out there just jamming with other teams, or random people you just met and you've been watching them and you feel comfortable driving with them, you get out there, you're just jamming. You don't actually, you'll drive until the damn tire pops, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're not looking down, you're not looking at anything, you have no mechanical sympathy. Your foot is to the floor the
Yep.
whole time. So
Yeah,
being able to
especially
rely on an ECU or something to take the stupid away from you, like,
yeah.
hey, let the ECU be smart because you're dumb.
Yep, because Friday when you first go out there, you're kind of taking it easy on the car because you want to make it to Saturday or Sunday, and by that
Right.
last day, you're just oh, another one, another one, another one. My
Yeah.
tires are still there, another one, and then either the tires
Yell at
go or you
any
want.
random person to check your, hey, check my tires. Check my tires, right? I mean, you're just yelling out the window at any random bystander, like, hey, look under the car. They feel kind of slick. Yeah, you got no tire left. I bet I can do one more. Like,
Yeah.
I'll just stay
I,
further away from the wall this time.
I'll be in the back. I'll be in the back.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just ride the cords for a
Yeah.
little bit.
Right.
uh,
Yeah, man. It's
what kind of events have you done, and like which ones are you kind of looking forward to in the future? If we
man.
get any this year, I should say that.
Yeah. Well, what sucks is, so this year I had kind of made an executive decision to chill. Um, Having two kids and a house and like working three different jobs to just support this habit. And um, my plan was I got invited to drive Import Alliance down in Atlanta. That was like 2 weeks ago, so that got canceled. Um, so this year, as far as I'm probably not going to, there is one event in like September, and it's the Kenda Cup. So Kenda Tires is now a big part of grassroots drifting, which is really cool because I'll be honest, like I've driven on a handful of pretty badass tires, and the Kendas kind of take like as far as like full send driving. I mean like no mercy on tires. I've driven on Ironmans. I've driven on Falcons. I've driven on Federals. I've driven on what else have I driven on? The Kendas. Um, I tried some Nitto Invos, which were badass, but they were huge. Just freebie hand me downs. But I've driven on a couple different types of 200 treadwear, like full send Billy Badass tires.
Yeah.
And out of all the tires that I've driven on, the Kendas, the new KR20As and the 300 treadwear, 265, 35, 18, they last the longest, even with like being brutal. Like third gear pinned smoke show, they lasted me 16 laps.
Oh wow.
Smoke show every time. Every time. I mean, like left foot braking, like as hard as I could, and I still had tread left. I just didn't want to go out on them, right? You know.
Yeah.
But um, didn't answer your question at all. That was a random plug of tires.
Oh, it's fine. Like, I don't think I've ever really talked about tires on a podcast because it's kind of one of those things that I haven't thought about when it comes to it.
Right.
Because, I mean, there's a lot of sticky tires that people run out there, but they always tend to be like very, very small tread depth, and they
Yeah.
usually don't last long. And I've ran a set of the Kendas before, and they were awesome. But I think they weren't. I think they're maybe a 300
Probably the
treadwear.
original KR20s.
Yeah,
Original
because
Kaisers.
yeah, because I think that's back when I think we got a bunch of them for final bout, like one or two. It was a long time ago, but they
Yeah.
were awesome. Lasted me like the whole day. I didn't have much power, but still, um, they're a
Yeah.
good
I
time.
mean, I was super impressed. That's actually what this car came like the wheels that like the drift spares that came with this car had Kendas, the original Kaisers on it. The only thing I had an issue with those was like you would eat the edges before the center, no matter how much tire pressure you ran. Like I don't know why, but you can't run low tire pressure with them because you'll just destroy the sidewalls. Um, but yeah, so events that I've driven. Um, Grid Life. I've driven Gingerman, which is probably my favorite track that I've driven on.
Oh,
It's beautiful track.
a lot of people I don't think realize like how good Gingerman is for like a good drift track. I know like turn one is usually either like full send or and you're going into the dirt or like you like skate out of it. And it's
Yeah,
an awesome corner because you're flying at it and like
yeah.
linking from one to two. Is that 2-3, that one big sweeper, or is it just two? I think it's just two.
So you've got one and then two, and then there's like a short straight and then into three.
Yeah,
And that's
three's the
pretty
corner.
much what most. Yeah, that's what most. Those are all the like all the corners that are like the quote spectator corners,
Yeah.
and those are great. But then you got like the whole back part of the track, which is sick.
No.
There's
The
a fourth gear sweeper back there that is
Yep.
just rad.
What
And
the
the
best
problem,
the best is 5, 6, 7, and 8. And like going in
yes,
through that slight turn where you're uh, maybe 100 miles per hour, and then
yeah,
just ripping e-brake into that corner,
yep,
and
and
is
it's
one of the
super tight
best.
corner, and then
Yep. And then
yeah, bro,
you
it's
jump
it's
on the
sick.
gas and you're into a medium-sized sweeper into a right-hander, and it is so good and it's so fun. And like, I don't think people realize like how good that part of the section
Yeah,
is until you actually like in car, because a lot of people that
you
see it,
have to be in the car.
yeah, it's just
Yeah,
a
there's
blast. And
yes,
nobody
dude,
sees that corner
it's amazing.
because it's in the middle of the infield and you don't know it until you're like in the car driving on that track. And
Yep.
that is like easily one of my favorite tracks. And
Yeah. I love the town too. Like it's not just the track, but like you're what 10 minutes down the road and you've got this like super cute little town that has like a bunch of good places to eat. You got the freaking the Lake Michigan like right there, so you can go like walk around on a beach.
yep.
Like I mean, it's like everything about like Gingerman that I love.
Yeah,
Like
and my localish track is Shawano, and that is you go outside of Shawano and it's just hillbillies and cults.
right.
So it's a little different up there.
Yeah, dude. I luckily Lexington is in Kentucky, but it takes you probably an hour to get into the real sticks. Like
Yeah.
there are the sticks in Kentucky. We all know there have been movies made, but yeah, man. Like Gingerman was my first big road course that I ever drove. Then I drove Road Atlanta, and it's terrifying. The first time I drove Road Atlanta was back when they had both sets of S's still,
Okay.
instead of just having the big S's.
Yeah.
Like they had the two different sets, and you could go like the slow guy, like the grassroots guys would have to go through the tight S's, and then you dump out into the big S's. And I honestly wasn't really ready for that kind of commitment. And man, I sent it off twice down the hill where the small S's used to be on the bottom half of the S's.
Yep.
That was terrifying. I mean, like one of my buddy's girlfriends had a video of the bottom of my car.
Oh
Like that's how
Jesus.
fast I went off. They were like, "Yeah, you could see your exhaust." I was like, "Oh, yeah." So that was terrifying. Um, but once I got a little more seat time, and the following year the car was set up a lot better. Did Gingerman again. That's when I built the 1.5J. So I had a little more power, a little more torque, and uh, honestly, I put BC coilovers on it. Shameless plug for BC coilovers, but um, I went from some Stance GR Pluses, which I thought were supposed to be the like bee's knees. I was like, yes, these are awesome. But I think they were just off the shelf, and I think that was the big thing. Is like the BC built me a set of coilovers that were like, I talked to Cameron Moore,
Okay.
and being that he did pro with an SC, he gave me some tips and yeah, do these spring rates, and they're a 20K front and an 8K rear. This thing squats so hard, but it is a different car. It's way lower than it should be, so all the suspension geometry is like screwed, but it drives a million times better. So I get out on Road Atlanta, and it was just like all of a sudden I was like, hey, I'm not a moron. I actually can drive. The car's set up right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
Proper car setup does go a long way, especially when it comes
long
to
way.
like with coilovers and like a lot of like trying to figure out
Yeah.
because especially when it comes to like when you start to put a bunch of weight into the back and you start to get a bunch of toe or an extra excessive amount of camber when it gets low like that, depending on what kind of like setup you have. I mean, making sure your suspension does the right thing when it squats, it does really
Yeah.
help.
It helped a lot. I can't stress to people enough to like do a proper setup on your car because all of a sudden it's like you go from having absolutely no clue what you're doing to like all of a sudden being like comfortable in your car.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yep. And
Um,
it does make a big difference.
huge. But I had no idea, man. Like I hadn't really talked to anybody. I was like, I talked to a friend's friend who was a friend, you know, and they were like, yeah, just try this. And like the first few years, I was like, I guess this is how it's supposed to feel. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I felt like my little my original street car felt better than like this supposed proper setup drift car. Well, it's because it wasn't set up right. Once it got set up right, it was like, oh man, that's how this is supposed to feel. Sick, you know?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the times you got to learn the hard way before you learn the right way.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Um, like you were talking about different places that I've driven, and I drove with the East 10 guys because they were the closest thing to Kentucky. They're down in Tennessee. Um, Ended up befriending the guy who puts it on, Louis. He's an amazing dude, super good dude, and he helped me a lot when my first event, just telling me like, hey, you should really try doing this, and then um, it was good to just talk to someone around it a lot longer than I had, and once I started doing grid life, man, I started just trying to just soak up as much knowledge as I could. So I started talking to Nick Swan. He sees everybody, right? Like he sees the good guys, the bad guys, the pro guys, the shitbox cars that do great, the pro cars that do shit. So he
Yep.
he looks at, and he's been around. He's been sending people off the line for years and years and years and years. So like I went to a no star bash and I was just like doing a shit job. Couldn't drive. It was like what am I doing so wrong? So I talked to him for probably 20, 30 minutes, and like all of a sudden again, boom. It was like, oh, that that's why. I need to stop using the rev limiter as a traction control. Like learn how to take your
Uh,
foot off the
yeah.
throttle a little bit.
Modulation of
But like,
throttle.
yeah, man, like I didn't know. I was just like, the car makes horsepower. Let's put it all to the ground, and
Yep.
having people like Louis and Nick, um, they have been really helpful to everything I've done. Um, and then like the Wild Running Crew, we very rarely get to drive together. The only time that I can think of that we've almost all of us have had our cars in the same place at the same time was Team Vibes a few years ago. And two or three of us didn't even make it there with their cars. But we were all together for the first time. Like we talked every single day. But very, very rarely do we have cars in the same place. Like I went down to IA one year and helped them, with their cars, no car. I didn't have my car. Um, and then vice versa, if I need something, they would lend a hand with me. I mean, it's really cool being a part of like a team. A team is more than just like a group of cars that drive together. Like a real
Yeah.
team is, let's take it fast and furious, right? I mean, like it's like a family, right?
Yeah.
You got people you butt heads with, but also people that you would still like do whatever you could for them. And having them help me with my car setup, help me with, you know, oh man, what do you think about this? Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is a shit idea? You know, being able to bounce those kind of ideas off of them has been pivotal for me. Like, I don't do much outside of work, so having these guys be there for me um, has been pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think that's all I got for you. Do you want to shout out anything before you go?
Oh, I want to I want to tell you, appreciate you, reaching out, and been definitely fun talking, man. I mean, it's lots of rambling of nothing, but at the
Oh,
same
dude,
time, like,
that's the best part about it. That's why I like it. That's why I do it
I
half the
have
time.
to. Did I lose you? There you
Yeah,
are.
there we
Okay.
go.
Yeah. So one thing that I'll I have to throw out there is there's a handful of people that have really helped me with this car, and obviously Haltech's a big one. I don't know that I would have been able to wire this car by myself when I first started working for them. And they've just being able to have that job has really opened up a lot of doors that you wouldn't normally just walk into. Um, Working with BC on these coilovers was amazing. Um, Tile, they're amazing. I've had the opportunity to work with the guys at Vibrant on that V12 project, and Art and those guys are just fantastic people. That I'll tell you what, that was a bucket list item for me. Was like when I first started welding and doing fabrication, man, if I work with Vibrant Performance, I will have made it, right? Like, and having that opportunity was definitely something, the old bucket list. Everybody who's helped me, I'm forgetting all kinds of people, but I appreciate everybody, and the drifting community is something that I wish all racing had, because like we'll all help each other. No, like we don't know, we're all drifters. We all drive drift cars. We do stupid shit in cars and burn off a bunch of tires. But none of us, most of us don't really know each other. But like if we're at an event and somebody breaks their car, like it's unrepairable, and they've got an axle that you need, they'll just hand it to you. Like, oh yeah, go out there, man. Like,
Yeah.
go have some fun. Like that sense of community is something that really has. That was kind of the draw to drifting, and also what has kept me with drifting. And that's just, we're all a big family. We're all a bunch of assholes that love to hate each other. You know.
Yep. I know that
So
feeling.
you know, that's
Yep.
it's really an amazing thing that we do.
Sweet. Thanks for being on. It's been awesome talking to you. We'll have to do this again, especially
Yeah,
maybe get
absolutely.
the whole team together and talk shit about each other and whatnot.
Absolutely. That'd be
There's probably
great.
tons of war
That'd be
stories.
great. You would get a kick out of that. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely, man.
Thanks for being on. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Later, man.